Hello everyone, how's it going? My name's Ben, welcome to the Bonny Rackham, and we are now on to one of my faves. It's episode 6. So yeah, firstly, apologies for missing last week's. Just a very busy week. I didn't have time to sit down and do it all. Back on track now. As you can see, got a little bit of a different setup again. I'll settle on something eventually, but I got myself another little cheeky green screen. We'll see how that works, because it was annoying me, it just being a square on the picture. So let's see if that looks a bit better and I just blend in a bit nicely. So let's get into this episode and start off with a title.
First item.
Yeah, so coming straight from episode 5, this almost feels like a part 2. We saw what happened in the daytime in Dance to Dance in the last episode, and now we're kind of getting a continuation of that now at night time in the early hours. Midnight Waltz kind of feels like a good continuation. The pace has slowed a bit, and a lot of dancing in the dark still. Wait, Dancing in the Dark is actually a much better title than Midnight Waltz. Yeah, alright, scrap that, it's not Midnight Waltz. I'm going to call it Dancing in the Dark. That is actually so much better. Because that actually works as a continuation. This is called Dancing in the Dark because, yeah, as I just said, it all ties in with the last episode and dancing. And I promise I'm not going to keep saying they're dancing the dance all the way through this one. But it kind of follows. So, yeah, alright, we got that one then. Alright, we got that out the way. That was messy, but we got there. Okay, Dancing in the Dark is episode 6. Alright, let's get into it.
Next item.
Okay, so we again have a new writer and a new director. This one was written by Heather Belson, and this is directed by TJ Scott. Some more people at the helm. Yep, excited to see if their names come up again. Okay, we just get a very little quick scene to open. You know, Mac's waking up, she's still in her little tent. It looks like she's got some fresh bruises on her. And yeah, it looks like she's not really probably been able to sleep for long periods of time. She's looking a bit shattered and knackered. She looks outside her tent and she sees Anne is sat guarding her, you know, around a kind of fire. Again, this is all at night. And Anne's gone from being, you know, visually uncomfortable with her treatment last episode to not on my fucking watch this episode. Okay, so yeah, so now we're on board the Andromache, which obviously the Walrus crew, Flint and that lot, they've taken over. But Bryson and a few of his men are still holed with slaves below deck. So, yeah, we're sort of carrying on with that. Yeah, so the Walrus crew are transporting what they can over from now to their ship. Billy checks in with a crewmate, Logan. It's clear everyone's now aware the Scarborough is onto them, you know, which we found out at the end of last episode. Billy's hopeful they'll breach the bunker soon. Yeah, and Logan points out it's only 4 hours to sunrise and asks if Flint will let them leave if they can't get the guns out by then. Billy just sort of shrugs and gives him a pat on the shoulder. That's a no then, Billy. Crew member called, I think he's called Lars, and Gates, they're instructing another guy of the crew of the current plan. The plan is to kind of smoke them out in an attack. So Billy's very distracted. He approaches Gates and asks him if Flint's said anything to him. Thinks it's a bit suspect that the Scarborough is onto them. Gates said Richard Guthrie must have been involved, and, you know, Billy knows that, but thinks it's suspicious that he was supposed to be under guard at Miranda's home, you know, and now all this has happened. Billy asks Gates, what do we really know about her? And suggests it's time they start asking some real questions. The good thing with Billy in this episode, I love he's finally confident and he's in the flow of this and he's ready to call Flint out now and stand up and be a bit braver. But I am completely with Gates when he says, Billy, like, not now. Gates' face indicates he's had or been having the same sort of thoughts regarding Flint and possibly Miranda. But he's talking sense. Billy, let's get away from, you know, this immediate double issue of the Navy and this band of heavy armed men, you know, below deck, guarding the very things we need. We've wanted this confident Billy the last few episodes, and, you know, now it's here. It's almost just like, not quite yet, Billy. Just let's wait. Let's get away from all this. So it's a very kind of frustrating on that kind of respect with Billy, this episode. And yeah, we just get a great little shot of Flint just kind of looking out to sea while this conversation's been happening. Yeah, we'll see some great lighting and, you know, and shots in this episode, especially all in the dark as well. Okay, so yeah, we're on the lower deck now with a chained up slave. They're passing this a rag forwards, And when it gets to the front, Mr. Scott, he ignores it. The woman behind him, whose name I have forgotten, but she will play like a small part in future episodes, possibly in a later season. She asks him to take it and place it in the hole above her head to signal to the pirates. You know, kind of like a white flag. She says if they help them, meaning the pirates, they'll bring us home maybe. Mr. Scott just coldly says no. Yeah, this is my strongest episode where season 1 and season 3 Mr. Scott are really not the same person. There's arguments to be made at a couple of points, maybe it was in mind. But to me personally, I don't think the writers had his season 3 double life secret agent man in mind, you know, with this episode. I know he'll come through, like, eventually by the end, but he does irritate me in this first half. He says a few of the stronger men might get work in Nassau, but the rest of them shouldn't kid themselves. Says they're just as much cargo in Nassau as anywhere else. I get he's bitter, and yeah, he probably sadly does have a kind of point here. But as the woman points out, it's not your decision to make for all of us, pretty much, she says. She says, we have a chance to be free, and he just says coldly, I don't care. Come on, Mr. Scott, you've got to snap out of this. This isn't who you are at all. Obviously, it's tough for him. He's feeling betrayed, but he's got to snap out of this one. And he says, there are weapons on this ship, weapons that are very dangerous to someone I love. Yeah, I've heard argument he could be talking about Maddie here, but nah, I think he's very clearly talking about Eleanor. Again, I don't think they had that in mind with him at this point. He says, no matter what happens to me or you, those weapons must not be returned. Yeah, you know, I won't harp on about it, but I'm just not a fan with what's going on, Mr. Scott, most this episode, until he does snap out of it a little bit. Him and Billy just kind of missing the bigger pictures at the moment in this episode. And the woman kind of gives him a, oh, well, fuck you kind of look, and places the rag in the hole herself. So now we are back on Nassau, and Lillywhite, he's still at it. He's been going at it all day and night now by this point. It's close to becoming a full-on we ride at dawn kind of mob. The captain's patience inside Eleanor's tavern is wearing thin. 2 hours, she's been considering her decision. Captain Naff says he, for one, thinks it's a good sign. It means she's taken her decision seriously. I love this guy. He's such a funny little side character. Captain Lawrence has got no patience for that, though. And as one of the other captains points out, if she doesn't decide soon, they will be without Hornigold's blessing. And even worse, the mob will most likely descend into chaos, you know, causing a lot of damage just for the sake of Eleanor needing to swallow her pride. And Naff says, maybe you just need to have a little more faith in people. Bless this man. Bless Captain Naff. Captain Naff for MVP. Not really, but bless him anyway. Finally, Eleanor dramatically enters. You know, she's still very stony faced. This has obviously been hard for her. You know, we've seen this now. We understand why. And she just gives the smallest of nod kind of towards Hornigold. He says he'll take the good news to Lillywhite. As she's about to turn away, she sees Hammond and a few of his men. And, you know, he kind of blows her a kiss and they're laughing. And it's just like, oh, you bastard. You just revel in this kind of stuff, don't you? He just loves it. And, yeah, we cold cut, you know, to him pretty much straight away back at Vane's camp. And he's reporting the good news to the men. They're back in business. You know, Max probably very likely hears this. And he approaches her tent. Anne is standing, you know, cross-armed outside. One crewmate kind of states she doesn't want anyone touching Max. Hammond asks her, you know, what her problem is. And she says, another step and I'll show you. Jack is quick to the scene. You know, he's obviously nearby. And he's been a bit far too polite to Hammond for my liking, but that's kind of who Jack is, isn't it? He doesn't kind of go in too nasty. And Hammond tells Jack, talk some sense into her, and if looks could kill, Anne would have killed him 10 times over already. Jack says, tell me you know, Mr. Hammond kind of wanders off a little bit, and Jack says to Anne, tell me you weren't about to fight Mr. Hammond over that fucking whore. And Anne says, don't call her that. Yeah, Jack, you are also irritating me a little bit in this scene today as well. There's talking sense and logic, but at some point, I think you've got to catch on and understand why your partner's feeling some kind of way about all this. He does say he's failed to appreciate how deeply the situation has disturbed her. If she's intent on following this course of action, then I suppose we should do our farewells now, because I don't think I could stomach watching them throwing you into that tent as well and having their way with you, which is where I fear this story ends, unless you pull your shit together. And, you know, Anne's still glaring at Hammond for all this. She's not barely listening. He gives her hat a little flick to get her attention. Yeah, I understand. It's a tough spot for Jack. It really is. And he's doing his best to hold it all together. But I don't know. I feel maybe as quartermaster and kind of acting captain right now, he could be maybe being a bit more helpful and maybe doing a better job of kind of, I don't know, I don't know what he can do, though. It's one of those, like, I want him to be more sensitive to what Anne's feeling, but at the same time, what can he actually do? It's tough. So yeah, again, calling back to what I've said briefly a couple of times, you know, even though Jack, hasn't actively participated in the abuse of Max, he still had no qualms with her treatment, and even though he does say he's failed to understand how much it was bothering Anne, he's still basically telling her to get over it, or I guess they're just gonna, it'll be your turn next, you know. But yeah, I can only really be mad at him in this scene, though, as we'll see how much Anne means to him a bit later, and this whole other side of their relationship. And Hammond approaches her, and she clearly wants to shank him, you know, right there and then, but she has to let him through. It's clear to her at this point Jack is not going to be supporting her with this one, and she's going to have to think of something else. And yeah, even when Hammond goes into the tent, Jack doesn't know what to say, you know, to Anne, and he just walks off. So, yeah, boo Jack in this scene. I'm not a fan of it. Again, I'm not too sure what he can do, but I do feel he could maybe be doing a bit more, but we'll never know. Because Anne's about to do some shit. Okay, so we're back to Billy now on board the Andromache. So he goes into a cabin to read Miranda's letter that he found last episode. You know, one man, watchman, tells him, Captain says no light. And Billy just answers, I know, and he lights a lamp anyway. He is done. This is Billy done. So we hear the voiceover, you know, Miranda's letter to Admiral Thomas. I won't read it all. Basically, she's wrote to an admiral, a friend of Mr. Guthries, dropped him a few quid, £500, on the gamble that this guy would be able to grant her and Flint a new life, despite knowing his reputation kind of as a pirate on the seas. And the part that obviously catches Billy's attention, he's caught in a dangerous plot with wicked men who will most certainly kill him when they learn of his betrayal. Billy, of course, completely misunderstands this letter, and a letter we know that Flint has no idea about at this point. Quite a desperate and risky move from Miranda without alerting Flint, for this very reason that's all going to kind of come to pass. Maybe she knows he'd never agree to it straight out like this, but figures if it works, he might just do, because the option's there. You know, that's the only thinking I can think of that she'd do that, and I know she's obviously desperate and lonely at this point, and we're going to see a bit more of that in a bit. Definitely a risky move from her, for sure. And yeah, and while this letter was being read, we see a clip of Miranda writing it, and the crew prepping the guy who's going to be heading into the bunker. And yeah, we see he's keeping low and being stealthy, but with a couple of Bryson's men's guns on him, it's a lost cause, and he knows it. You know, he kind of goes, oh. And yeah, he's shot and killed before he can throw the smoke bomb. The crew up, you know, are dejected and mourning their brother, and Flint just coldly says, get me another plan. Billy approaches Gates and says he needs to talk to him now. They go to find a quiet spot, and we quickly, you know, cut to another little scene. We see Bryson fiddling with some sort of device. Seems like some sort of trigger mechanism, so we'll get back to that. Billy shows Gates the letter, and he emphasises the word betrayal, when Gates is pretty indifferent to it. Again, Gates rightly says, what do you want me to do about it right now, Billy? Gates is very flustered in this episode. He knows now the Billy and Flint situation is really coming to a head, and it does. And Billy tells Gates he knows about the Maria Elaine, and that Morley brought it to Gates' attention, and that he did nothing. He said he, meaning Flint, is playing with crewmates' lives now, just like he did then, and that he's getting away with it because they have been protecting him, because Gates is protecting him, and, you know, and Gates cuts him short. He says he's free to go with the crew with it, but he will do everything in his power to frustrate him. And, Billy seems a bit hurt by that, but he continues, tells him straight again, they're in fucking battle right now. Won't undermine Flint's control of what is frankly a shit situation. And yeah, all based on a letter written by a woman neither of them know a thing about. And Billy asks him to promise that when they get back to Nassau, that he will deal with this. But before Gates can answer, Flint approaches them and calmly asks if everything is alright. Gates says, fine, Billy's come up with our next move. Flint says, well, it's 3 hours to sun up, so perhaps he'd like to share this with the whole class. And yeah, we'll obviously learn in a little bit that Flint overheard a bit more than we kind of realise of this conversation. So yeah, I don't think Flint buys any of this. Okay, so now we're at Miranda's. Our first little scene with Miranda. And Pastor Lambrick comes to visit Miranda, in the midnight early hours. He says to her, you shouldn't be here as greeting. She tells him she lives here, questions him calling her at this late hour. Points are made. A very inappropriate time, for him to be visiting a lady on her own. We learn a Mr. Underhill has agreed to take Mr. Guthrie in. Some bribing and promises involved, by the sounds of it. And Miranda just says, how nice for Mr. Guthrie, very sarcastically. The pastor says Mr. Guthrie now sleeps safely protected by Underhill's estate. Of course he does. And Miranda says she needs no protection. And the pastor points out that he betrayed Flint and she helped him do it. And Miranda tells him he does not understand any of this. He grabs her, a bit too heavy-handed for my liking, and asks her to help him understand. Normally, I give him a hard time and I'm not keen on him, and I'm not. I think he kind of means well here. But again, to flip it, it's obviously more than just a general concern that keeps him returning to Miranda, though, as we're about to see, and she knows that. She's about to expose him and give the chance to show that he is a bit of a hypocrite, and, she's just looking to get him off her back. So yeah, we're going to we'll get a bit more of that in a little bit. But first, picture the scene. You're standing on your balcony overlooking just a gorgeous view of Nassau. You've had a day. You've been talked down by a lot of old condescending old men, and had an angry mob at your door all day, and you've had to swallow some pride. You're just ready to call it a day. You're about to turn in, and then...
Good evening, cunt.
Okay, yeah, so I would have a very different reaction than Eleanor. So, that would be a very welcome end to my day. But yeah, it's not a very welcome end to Eleanor's day, that's for sure. I replay that little moment at least 5 times every time I watch it now. I don't know why it is so funny to me. It's so funny. Just the delivery and just the audacity. Imagine you need a big favour and your opening line is to call the favourie a cunt in greeting. Just, who does that? Yeah, she insults her a bit as well, calls her a piece of shit and says it pains her being this close to her. And she also calls her out a bit as well. Makes good points how Eleanor does try to be one of them a little bit and lords her power over it, plays both sides when it suits her. So after she's read her for a little bit, Anne says, it should tell you about how desperate I am. And Eleanor asks, desperate for what? And Anne reluctantly says, your help. Anne says that night, Max told her to go fuck herself. They should have toasted her. And if she had a cock, they probably would have. There's a sad reality there. Max had been a man and it had gone that way. She probably would have been welcomed with open arms and as one of the crew, I imagine. She says, a bit softer, what's happening to Max? It's not right. And Eleanor says she's tried to help, but Max didn't want it. Anne says you could kill him. Says she'd do it herself, but the men have seen them feuding. If she goes anywhere near him, she'll have them all at her throat and no one at her back. And yeah, she kind of mentions Vane's gone, and that sort of catches Eleanor's interest a bit, and she asks where. And Anne says, I don't much give a shit. She really doesn't. And Eleanor basically says, what if they suspect her? And it all kind of leads back to me, which, it's a good point. To which Anne insults her some more and calls her a coward. But she's making a good point. She's being smart and thinking it through. So yeah, Anne has another little pop at her and says after all her posturing, she won't lift a finger to help. And she says Anne's plan isn't dangerous enough. She suggests they take out Hammond and his 8 men to prevent any fallout from just killing Hammond. Tougher for them, but makes sense. They all disappear at once tonight with no suspicions to fall on either of them. Anne says it's impossible, and Eleanor says they just need a little help. And we get a cold cut to Silver. I don't know how else to say this except no. I suppose there's fuck no, or fuck you. And I love Anne's amusement in the background while Eleanor is trying to talk him into it. And, you know, she brings Flint up and Silver's hope they might become friends. And she asks him, you know, if he really believes that Flint would leave a loose end like him lying around. And again, Eleanor being really smart here, you know, still showing she's well earned that MVP last episode. Eleanor says now she's running the island. He doesn't want her as an enemy, he's Silver. And she may be the only person Flint will listen to in his defence. The words hit Silver. Bit of blackmail going on here, safe to say. But it's a good play from Eleanor. I think a later Silver probably gets out of this one or works out, you know, some interior kind of motive to play and something in it for him. But in these early stages, he's got to muck in a bit and do some of the dirty work. He's being used a little bit here, but you know, it's all working in his favour ultimately. So we are back at Miranda's now with her and Pastor. Yeah, they're talking a bit just about religion and her husband. She tells him she had a very different life before this with her husband, with Thomas. Yeah, she's getting ready to kind of make her play now. She talks about how Thomas would have talked religion with him from dusk to dawn, would have left everything he holds sacred in tatters. Not from malice or hate, but from love. I think, in a way, she's kind of describing what she's about to do, basically, maybe. I don't know, you know, I think she obviously is talking about Thomas. Maybe, I don't know, she's talking herself into it a little bit here. She tells him when she lost Thomas, Flint brought her here for her own safety. And there's nothing more he needs to understand. Maybe she could have left it there and bade him goodnight and all that sort of stuff. But she plays her card. Asks him why he's here. He knew she'd be alone and it's inappropriate. And yeah, you know, she's moving in closer. Her voice is getting a bit softer and he's clearly getting a bit flustered. And she, you know, she goes in for it. She says, "You're not here because you want to protect me, Pastor. You're here because you want to fuck me." Big gamble play here from Miranda. We've just seen Anne, you know, a bit desperate, making a play she doesn't want to, really, but has no other resort. And now Miranda is seemingly doing the same. I take this, yeah, this is a final play just to get this guy off my back. I've tried talking, and I'm kind of done now with him popping by accidentally every so often. I just want him off our back for a little while now. So there's no objections from the pastor when they start making out and stuff. And yeah, and poor Miranda has another terrible sex session. Just another terrible sex session. At least it's quick. We can be thankful for that. Again, I think maybe on first watch, Miranda really is being set up to be, you know, a bit of a kind of serpent, sly type woman. And while there is something that feels maybe a bit, I don't know, cruel and cunning about this, that leaves a bit of a bad taste, Lambrick's not complaining. He's a consenting adult that can, and given his position, should say no at any point, and he doesn't, you know, not even I shouldn't, you know, he's just straight in. It's only later, you know, maybe next episode or the one after, we'll see him really struggling with it, and he's, you know, kind of like, oh yeah, the pastor thing. But he's good to go here. So yeah, you know, I only give her a little bit of a she could have not been lying, and she could have really been this kind of lost woman that just needed, you know, a man was supposed to trust, a man of religion to kind of talk to her and bring her back down to earth a little bit. And he went with the offer when it was presented, which he shouldn't have really. So yeah, you know, they're both kind of, no one really gets a pass on this one. Okay, so we are, yeah, back kind of on the Walrus Andromache kind of thing. Gates is describing the plan. It's a thin plan, you know, to say the very least, and everyone knows it. Flint asks for volunteers. No one comes forward, so he just starts picking. Logan is the last name he picks. Logan's not for it. He thinks it's suicide, says it's suicide. Says what happens when they're killed? Will he, meaning Flint, just send in 4 more? He calls to Billy for support, and Mr. Logan, you know, he continues his descent and turns to Billy for support again. And Billy this time looks like he's about to question Flint, But Gates comes in with a save for Billy and ultimately probably Logan in the long run, I think. Well, in the long run, Anne's going to have her say. He puts a hand, on Flint's shoulder as he's walking by and says, Mr. Logan makes a valid point. Unfortunately, now is not the time. He smacks Logan, he punches him in the face, and then he kicks him. He says, anybody else got a point to make? He says, the captain's orders are law. That's what we signed up to, which is a good point, and exactly what the quartermaster has to kind of enforce, which is why this is so tough on Gates, all this. Again, we're just going back to this, just not the time, guys, not the time. But the lookout, thankfully breaks the tension when he spots something. The piece of cloth from the hold below. And yeah, I love the shot of Flint going on the beam. Such a classic Black Sail shot. Just something so majestic about it. A badass shot. One of my favourites throughout the whole show. Okay, so yeah, we're in Bryson's cabin now, or at least one of them, with Gates and Flint. And Flint's worked it out. There are slaves on the ship as well as weapons. And that means possible allies. He works out, from the finances, there's at least 9 strong men ready to fight. And Gates says, why would they help us? And Flint basically says, well, why wouldn't they? Well, what have they got to lose, sort of thing. And Gates brings up the next issue of how do they get them out of their chains. We cut below, and the woman tells Scott the person he'd see them all sold or killed to protect, he won't see them again. Yet Mr. Scott, he's still not having it. He's still just being, just being rude and just not listening to kind of reason. He says, you and I are both in this hold, but we are not in the same place. Yes, you are, Scott. Yes, you are, completely. In this moment, you absolutely are. And, and she immediately calls him out on this and says, maybe you get, nice treatment, but you're still a slave to your master, is kind of ultimately what she says. We have a real chance, but you want to just sit here in defeat. And then she says, maybe you're right. You and I are not the same. And yeah, this woman is kind of getting shit done in this episode. And I think that snaps him out of it a little bit. So yeah, I think it's Logan, by the looks of it, just from the little glimpse we get. He sends the cloth back through the hole and it lands with a thud. And they now have, I think it's a chisel, I want to say, to help break free of their chains. The door opens again and the lookout asks, what's the noise? It looks like Mr. Scott is about to really follow in Mr. Guthrie's footsteps and rat the girl out. And the lookout pulls her aside, but before he has the chance to do anything, Mr. Scott comes from behind and chokes him out with his chains. Okay, finally. Well played, Mr. Scott. That's my maroon leader. Meanwhile on deck, Billy and some lads are hammering in unison. Mr. Scott and the slaves below quickly work out, it's a noise diversion, so they can break through their chain. And yeah, we cut to sort of Bryson as well, and, he's worked out something dodgy's going on. Tells Mr. Hayes to secure the hold. The men head below, and they are bombarded, and chaos ensues. There's an all-out brawl, in the hideout area. Mr. Scott goes head-to-head with Bryson, and it looks like he's about to be choked out. When a gun appears through the looky hole, and he's clipped in the face. Bryson is clipped. Woohoo! Woolworth's crew burst through. Joshua's going in. Probably personal for him on this one. He's got the scars that indicate there's a good chance he probably was a slave. And yeah, Mr. Bryson, now with a shot face, he's kind of crawling towards a barrel. And this is where we can work out he's set up a kind of fuck you, Flint, explosive barrel as a kind of backup. But our girl from below deck, she stabs him kind of in the back of the neck or something. And yeah, and her and Mr. Scott have a nice, unspoken kind of quiet moment where I feel he sort of gives her a kind of thank you for snapping me out of that bullshit kind of nod. Before they leave, we kind of focus in again on the barrel. So now we're at Vane's camp and Silver approaches Hammond with a proposition. He's looking to sell the page again. Obviously, it's all crap, so I won't go into all the plan he goes over in the conversation that's all part of it. Okay, so yeah, before we get into this scene, can we just, firstly, Jack, I forgive you. I forgive you for earlier, because just look at the way he's kind of lounging on her. Oh, it's so adorable and cute. I also didn't realise this was Anne straight away, first time. I was like, oh shit. Anyway, it's such a short little moment, a nice little moment behind closed doors, looking at the tender side of their relationship. And, we'll see how much he does really love Anne and is on her side in all this fallout. So, of course, Anne knows what's about to happen. Hammond bursts in, and I love how Jack, even more cuteness, he does this protective kind of little shimmy towards her when he can see Hammond's angry, but he's also trying to kind of keep it cool as well. Basic gist, is they've made out Jack, or Jack or Anne, or both of them, lied about losing all the pearls. It's been said that he gave half to Max before the wrecks, and when Jack says that's a lie, Hammond produces some pearls as proof, and Jack's kind of working it out in his head, and Hammond asks where the rest of them are, and Anne answers, buried by the wrecks. The penny finally drops for Jack, and he just says, darling, I'm so very disappointed in you. Yeah, I'm sorry, Jack, mate, but shit had to be done. Yeah, I can't help but feel a little bit sorry for him in all this, though, as, it's all just really going to backfire on him and all he's achieved so far in this show, and it's going to go on for a little while as well for him, all this kind of backfire from all what's about to happen. And I don't think future Anne would ever allow Jack to be manhandled like the way he is in this bit, just like I think future Jack is maybe a bit more sensitive and in tune to Anne's way of thinking, but it's early days and they're developing characters, and I think season 2's events brings a lot of good development in their relationship for sure. So we get a very quick little moment where Silver returns to Eleanor's. He's a bit shaken, he pours himself a drink, at least he's out the cuffs now. I think he's been trusted for that much. And obviously, it's going to be a long night of waiting for them both to see this through. So Eleanor's extremely long day still hasn't finished. On the Walrus, they're transporting, it seems they finally have their cannons. And they're beginning the task, of craning, bringing everything over. And Flint tells Scott, he tells him he's surprised to see him. And, he's not too warm about it either, after his betrayal to Eleanor and ultimately, obviously, himself. To be fair to Mr. Scott, he stands up to Flint, looks him in the face and says his agreement was to protect Eleanor from him. Flint kind of tells him, he's been up against it, he's nearly faced another mutiny, and if he had any sense, he'd give him to the crew to deal with, to take the pressure off him. But he says he's not going to do that. He says, I'd rather prove you wrong. Nice line from Flint. And another side of his character we're seeing, another really interesting side that you kind of wouldn't expect. And Mr. Scott is not sure what to do with that, I think, after kind of what's all gone down so far. But I think it might have given him a bit of food for thought in his kind of feelings about Flynn. Gates sees Billy's chatting away to Dufresne, calls Billy over, and Billy kind of questions him if he thinks he's been blabbing. And Gates calls him son again, says to believe him that he is on his side. And Billy says, then get some answers once we're done here. It's a bit of a frosty final words between these guys, which is a bit sad. But though they will have a nice kind of little moment, I suppose, in a sec. So a cannon is kind of halfway between ships when a couple of crew members below accidentally set off this explosive. There's confusion on board and their location is just lit up like a Christmas tree. Billy helps Gates up from the rubble, knows the Scarborough, must have seen them, they know it's close. There's still 3 or 4 more guns in the hold, Gates points out, but Flint, he's looking pretty panicked, says there's no time for delay. So the bigger picture now is to get away from this ship that they have no chance again. And they're going to have to make do with what they have. They all reboard the Walrus and head out with haste, but soon realise something is slowing them down, a piece of the Andromache. It's attached to the ship, kind of after the explosion. And Flint and Billy head to the side of the ship to cut it loose. And it's great atmosphere, the sea is wild, the wind is blowing. And Flint joins the Terrible Timing Club and questions Billy about the letter he overheard them mention. He asks Billy what was in the letter. They cut a piece of the Andromache free. And Billy says, I think you know what was in it. Obviously, again, on this occasion, Flint has no idea what he's talking about. There's cannon fire from the Scarborough, and we just see Billy sort of cry out. Flint comes up screaming, man overboard. He tells Gates Billy fell. It's dark, the waves are wild, and Gates sadly says, we can't turn back or she'll tear us to pieces. So the question is asked, did Billy fall or was he pushed? I think Flint knows what Gates' suspicions will be in the look he gives him kind of here. I thought he had very likely pushed him in on first watch. Now, a few watches in, I don't know. I think it's kind of somewhere in the middle. I think there was likely maybe a moment that Flint could have reached out, maybe just a split couple of seconds to do something, but maybe he hesitated. But I don't kind of think he flat out, pushed him in. Flint wants to know what the letter's about. He can't get his answers with Billy dead. So, yeah, it's a tough one, and it's a big mystery. They kind of leave hanging that they'll never truly answer. It never really gets answered, does it, properly? We kind of go back to it a little bit, but it's not actually answered. What did you guys think happened in this kind of big moment here when you first watched it, or even now, what do you think happened? When Billy comes back with an even bigger kind of attitude, it kind of makes you lean towards, maybe he did, maybe he did give him a bit of a nudge. But yeah, ultimately, we'll never know. So Anne is walking with Jack, leading the men out to the wrecks. And Jack's, he's worked out her plan, that it's an ambush. And Jack asks, with whom did you scheme this? And still, Eleanor does not get called her name by Anne. Jack defends a couple of the men, being led there to their death. Says they never raised a hand towards the whore. I keep pointing out what each of them is calling Max, because there's a very interesting shift in a couple of episodes. He uses a lot of fancy Jack words to make the point that these men were loyal and stuck by Vane. Jack, he's still very much loyal to his captain, and I do like that about him, and I do feel bad for him again in the aftermath of all this. But when he says, "God damn it, Anne, do I not deserve a say in all this?" and she answers, "You had your say. Now I'll have mine." Yeah, Jack, with a bit of understanding and maybe intervening, this could have been avoided, perhaps. But yeah, he made it clear he was not going to be any help in this issue. So she's had to take matters into her own hands. We now cut between the ambush and Silver talking to Eleanor. And, he tells her when he first met her, he pegged her for an easy mark. Says between her and Flint, he's not sure who he should be more afraid of. And yeah, we've definitely seen a different side of Eleanor, in these last couple of episodes for sure. Yeah, Silver continues. He said those men out there made her angry because they made her admit she was wrong, made her feel weak. And Silver continues, I think you felt compelled to let everyone on this island know that in this place, no one fucks with you and gets away with it. And as he says that, we see Anne stab Hammond, and she's just loving every minute of it. And I say, cheers to that. Well done to Silver and to the ladies. Well played. And yeah, Eleanor's man comes back to give her the nod that it's all been sorted. And finally, we see Max is away from that camp. Alright, she's back at a brothel, but at least she knows what's what here. And honestly, even though on this watch I'm pausing a lot and making my notes as I go along, this little scene kind of still brought a little lump to my throat. Both because Max is finally free, from her tormentors. And secondly, because even though there's argument to be made, Anne has already been questioning stuff. I think this is the moment. I think this is Anne's, oh shit, kind of realisation moment, because Max reaches out her hand in thanks to Anne, and they both it lingers a little moment, it lingers a little longer. And yeah, I can't believe my gaydar, or my bidar I should say, failed me on first watch through this scene, just completely missed it. I caught it in episode 8, but I was just so happy in this scene, that Max was back. I just wasn't focused on anything else going on. So Anne snatches her hand back and says she didn't do it for her. Tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies, Anne. She leaves, and yeah, it's not Max's concern right now though. Finally, in the safety of her own walls, of her own room, she's finally alone and knows she's going to be left alone and able to just curl up on the floor, let those walls down and just cry it out a little bit. So glad that Max's horrible ordeal is over. Now we can finally get started on the Max is smarter than everyone on the show, a big portion of the time, hype train. So I'm excited to get into that one. So yeah, we are on the Walrus now, and Dufresne is calling out the names of all the men they lost. William Bones Mandalay is called. There's no body, obviously, so Flint takes his sword, Billy's sword from Logan, and he drops it in. I'm not sure what's going on with Flint when he does this, what his thought process is. And it's so hard to read now, even on, like a 4th or 5th watch. Is he Is he covering his, making it look like he's got an interest, or is he generally gutted? Gates looks both crestfallen and just suspicious as hell at the same time, just giving Flint some looks. We see the sword fall into the water from beneath. Great shot with that. And I knew, on the watch that Billy Bones was in Treasure Island, so was always confident we would see him again. I actually didn't think it would be so long a break between when we do, but I knew we would see him again. Yeah, I'm curious, if people with no idea about his part in the story, if you thought he was dead or not during this episode. I think that'd probably be quite disappointing if you did. I wish we got a bit more of kind of this episode's Billy kind of bites back kind of attitude before he went overboard, and saw that maybe pushed a little bit more. But then we'll get plenty of take no shit Billy once he's back, a different kind of side to Billy. So it's ultimately no big loss really. We will see you next season, Billy. That's you're going to be brought up in conversation again, but we won't properly get into any Billy discussion now for a little while. We'll be back with you soon, Billy. So in a tavern, and Jack is just brooding at a table. Anne is just very nonchalant, like she's not just co-organised and took part in the murking of 9 men. Jack says, I assume we won't be speaking of this again then. Well, before we close the lid on this, one last question just to satisfy my curiosity. And Anne just looks like a child that knows it's going to be getting a bit of a bollocking, but just couldn't care less. I've got a brother like it, in one ear, out the other. Yeah, almost a little bit proud sometimes, because ultimately they know the person telling them off, won't turn on them. They're still fine. They'll be fine after the bollocking, which is what she confirms, when Jack says, when she asked, well, shit, Anne, what makes you think old Jack will go along with this plan of ours and not plead the truth to his men, as he's most certainly going to feel duty-bound to do? What did you say? And Anne just says, I told her, given the choice between them and me, you'd choose me. Bit of a beat, and Jack just says, that's very fucking touching. Poor Jack. These two they shouldn't work. They're so yin and yang, but they just have something that we're just starting to see snippets of. Something so deep, so layered. It's like a brother, sister, lovers, soulmate. Even again, like we've seen in this little bit, a bit of a parent-child thing going on, that we'll sort of see flipped a few times throughout. It's just so many dimensions to their dynamic, and it's just a great little early episode showing that. Jack asks about Vane, and what's the plan when he returns then? And Anne, just says, you don't know where he's gone, do you? And she just says, he ain't coming back. I'm not sure why Anne is so confident on this factor, what information, she knows about this, but Jack definitely knows of his past, which obviously we'll learn more of in the next episode. So therefore I kind of assume Anne must as well. So maybe she's put it all together where he's gone. Maybe just wishful thinking on her part, as it's been pretty clear she's not a fan really. And then we just close, speaking of, we close with a quick scene where we see Vane in his skiff approaching a little island by the looks of it, and sat down we just see the big guy from his hallucinations, and we will get into some good Vane backstory and development next episode.
Last item.
Okay, so one of those mixed episodes where I love most of the stuff going on, but equally some things do frustrate me. As I said a couple of times, the women, they're getting shit done this episode. Bar Silver and arguably Flint, the boys are faffing about a little bit. Bryson and Hammond had the best moments for the lads this episode. Finally, we get to see the back of 2 disgusting trash humans, and it's so sweet to see it happen at the hands of, 2 very strong women. We get some Miranda this episode and learn what the letter was all about, and still playing the confusion and deceit well on first watch when it comes to her actions this episode. Eleanor's swallowed her pride and accepted Hornigold's offer, and though she probably shit her pants when Anne emerges from the dark, she provides her with a chance for a bit of revenge on Hammond. Things are tense on the Andromache. There's suspicions, dissensions, frustrations, and explosions, which results in my boy Billy Bones going overboard. It's a bit of a pace drop and a few minor little character nitpicks, as I've discussed. But I think I still really enjoy this one a bit more than the average consensus, I think. I wonder why. We are still just in the 8s ratings for me, so I'm going to give this one an 8.0. Right on the mark. Okay, so MVP. Props to the lady, who I know will later be named, but again, I can't remember off the top of my head, for metaphorically whacking Scott round the head a little bit with a snap out of it, kind of reality check, and then she was the one who gets the final blow to Bryson. Eleanor also coming in clutch again with the assists and the power play on Silver to enlist his help, but nah, and Bonny's got this one in the bag. As Max will point out next season, no one had her back while she was going through this horrific ordeal. Just no one. No one except Anne. And Anne has to go to someone she, absolutely despises, doesn't respect at all, for help as an absolute last resort. Likely knows it's going to backfire on her and Jack in terms of respect, though I don't think she's stressing it too much about that before. She gets the final kill on Hammond, and it's beautiful. Really great Anne episode, and yeah, my girl's off the mark. Alright, best scene. I do love the Jack and Anne fallout kind of scene in the tavern, like I went through, that's good fun. And the scene with Billy and Flint on the side, but I'm going to go with both Bryson and Hammond's kind of final demise moments. Yeah, again, just disgusting pair of humans I dislike from the go. Bryson's shot in the face and then he's stabbed in the back. And Hammond, he's having to look Anne right in the eye when she kills him. Rotting piss, the pair of yous. Best quote. While I love Jack's, that's very fucking touching kind of delivery, I just, again, Anne greeting Eleanor just with good evening, cunt. Just, it lives in my head rent-free and has done since the first time I saw it. Very deep and fantastically written piece of dialogue on last episodes, but sometimes just the small little comedy moments just do it for me in this show. So yeah, I have to just pick one of my favourite quotes forever, even though it's something of nothing. It's just for the delivery. It's so good. So yeah, that was episode 6. Thanks for watching, guys. I feel that was quite a lot to go through there, and I know I jumbled my words a lot in this one. My brain's a bit scrambled today, but hopefully I can edit something out of this and it won't be too mumble jumbled. It should be back as usual now for pretty much a weekly thing, maybe be another break around the Christmas, but I should be able to crack on now. But yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and we will be on to episode 7 next episode. Take care, peace out.